Hey, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here, thank you for clicking on the video. Anbernic has gone ahead and sent us another device. This is their new RG35XX SP device. Now, this is going to be the latest device in their series of their RG35XX series devices. And this one has a lot of people pretty excited. As you guys can probably see from the shell or from the box here, it is a clamshell. And it looks a lot like a old school Nintendo Gameboy Advance SP. So we're gonna go ahead and take this thing out of the box. We're gonna do a deep dive into it, and we're just gonna check it out. So let's go ahead and see what comes inside of the package. So the first thing that we've got here is the device itself, and we're gonna take a closer look at this in a quick second. So we'll set it down for now. Next in the box, we've got some wipes here that you would use to attach their screen protector that they typically include in all of their products. Let's just take a quick look. So we've got our screen protector, and we've got some cleaning wipes for that. We of course have a quick start guide and instruction manual. They do a pretty good job with this, so it gives you all your hotkeys and things like that. And then inside this little box here, we're gonna have a USB Type-C cable. We can get in here. So there it is, just a simple USB Type-C cable. All right, so as you guys can see, I was sent the silver color. Now this is available currently in at least 4 colors, and you can see that right on the box here. Now I imagine that they're probably, assuming this thing is fairly successful, they're gonna release this in a bunch of other colors. But we do have a silver. We've also got a gray that kind of looks like a Nintendo style colors. We've got a transparent blue, and we also have a transparent black. And they're pretty standard. If you're familiar with the Anbernic products, you'll pretty much know what those colors will look like. So I'm not going to show them off too much, but what we've got is the silver color. Now, I really like the solid silver color just because it does remind me of an original Nintendo SP handheld. And I'm sure we've all seen the silver color devices laying around. So let's go ahead and take a quick peek around the device. When we pop it open, we've got a 3.5-inch IPS display. Now that's going to have a resolution of 640 by 480, which is more than sufficient for this size handheld, and the games look pretty good on it, which we'll show off in a little bit. First thing, actually, let's go ahead and talk about the size. So it looks pretty close. However, the SP is just marginally smaller, 5 or 10% smaller. But generally speaking, it's a really good size. They've made it just a little bit more comfortable to hold. And it overall, it looks pretty darn good, even when you're looking at like the side profiles. It's pretty accurate to what an SP looked like. Now, when you actually look at this device, some notable changes. Obviously, we have 4 action buttons here instead of the 2 that you're going to get with the SP. D-pad looks almost the same. Like, they're super identical, just a little bit different in terms of their size. In terms of the actual feel, it feels good, very clicky. I don't know if I like the clickiness. It's kind of loud. It's not too terrible. If I bring this up, probably hear that a little bit, and that's consistent across all the buttons. So I don't know that I love that. It's not a big deal. It doesn't really bother me so much. Some handhelds have clickier buttons than others, and to be honest, I don't think it really impacts the gameplay very much. But those 4 action buttons, they do feel fairly good. In game, they're very responsive. D-pad feels good. You don't get any ghost inputs. Diagonals work quite well. Everything in general is pretty good with the main controls. Next, we have the start and select, very similar to the original handheld as well. Located right in the same spot. You've got your front-facing single speaker right in the middle too, exactly the same. And what they've actually done here is on the original SP, this little button here was actually a brightness toggle, and it allowed you to adjust the brightness of the screen. There was 2 different brightness options. They've implemented their menu button actually right here in the same location, which I thought was actually pretty clever, because it keeps the same look and feel of the original handheld, but it is actually quite functional, and it's a good spot for it to have that button there. Looking on the sides, we have our 2 LED indicators, exactly the same as the original, and then when we kind of take a peek on the side, we've got a power switch on the original console, whereas we have a power button and a reset button on the Anbernic device. Don't really have any criticisms of that. On the other side, we have a volume scroller. That's going to be on the original device here. Here we have just some volume buttons. I think they probably could have gone with a similar volume style, I guess, toggle on the Anbernic device, but I don't think that really matters ultimately. So when we go ahead and look on the top of the device, they've done a really good job replicating the shoulder buttons. So as you can see, you've got your R1, your L1, your L button, and your R button on the original console. The difference is that they've added in an L2 and an R2 button, and I got those backwards, L2 and an R2 button. But one thing that's pretty interesting, if I get rid of this one and we actually just look at this handheld, you can see that the L2 and the R2 buttons are actually raised. And when you are holding on to the actual console, that actually makes a big difference in the comfort. It's much easier to hit the R2 button without accidentally pressing the R1 button, and I think they've just done a really good job here. One thing I will mention is that the buttons do seem a little bit loose, whereas on the original console, obviously they're much tighter. You're not going to really have like the clickiness of the button wiggling around too much, other than when it goes up and down. But it's just, you can kind of hear it sounds like a package of like Tic Tacs, which isn't really great because on the original you don't really get that. So I wish they would have gotten a little bit cleaner and tighter on those buttons, but overall it's actually pretty well designed and pretty comfortable to hold. Now in terms of the I/O on the device itself, we have on the top, we've got a USB Type-C charging port, but that also doubles as an OTG connector. So you can connect in additional peripherals, other controllers, whatever else you really want to connect to it. It also has an HDMI out. So if you want to connect this to a monitor, you can do that. It's got a mini HDMI out. On the sides, we've already talked about this. Along the bottom, we've got a 3.5mm headphone jack, and then we've got two micro SD card ports. One is going to be for the main operating system, as well as games. You can load up games. I've got both games and the OS loaded up in here. And then the second one would be exclusive to additional game files if you wanted to do that. Super simple. You grab your SD card, pop it in. It'll automatically generate the folders for you, and then you can take your SD card into your computer and effectively load it up with whatever you like. So now let's go ahead and talk about the technical specs of the device. The CPU in here is the H700 quad-core ARM Cortex-A53 CPU. That's clocked in at 1.5 gigahertz. This is the same CPU that they've included in their RG35XX device and the RG35XX Plus device. So for performance, you're going to get the exact same performance out of this as you will out of any of those other two devices. The GPU in here is a dual-core Mali G31MP2 GPU, and then we've also got 1 gig of LPDDR4 RAM. Storage size is going to be 64 gigs with the included micro SD card. And it is running a custom Linux OS. And then in terms of some additional features, we do have Wi-Fi built in, and we do have Bluetooth, but it is only version 4.2. So that means you're only going to be able to connect this with Bluetooth controllers. You won't be able to connect this with any sort of wireless Bluetooth headphones. Now, in terms of its battery life, it has a 3,300 milliamp hour battery, and they advertise that that's going to last about 8 hours, but that I didn't find that was actually the case in real world testing. Perhaps if you're going to be playing some really low powered games, you might be able to stretch it out to 7 or 8 hours, but realistically, when you are combining different consoles that require different power requirements like PSP or Dreamcast or PS1 or even Super Nintendo, you're going to see a pretty substantial drop off in that. I think that you can safely say you're going to get about 5 hours. And if you do a little bit of lighter gameplay, you could probably push that to 6 or 7 hours or so. So now that we've got this handheld ready to go, let's go ahead and boot it up. So we're just going to go ahead and press the power button. We've got our LED indicator came on, our screen's now lit up, and let's wait for it to boot up. So it takes about 15 to 20 seconds or so for it to fully load, which isn't too bad. Overall, we're going to get the same sort of UI that we get with all of these other Anbernic RG RG35XX series devices. Now this looks like it is a little bit more cleaned up and it is a little bit more polished. Now, as always, we have our games room. This is going to give us access to a bunch of emulators that will run on a native or a standalone emulator. If we go into the RA game, this is going to be running all the games through RetroArch through their associated core. We have a favorites section, which obviously you would just favorite your game and they'd be displayed here. We've got a history, which is going to show you the most recent set of number of games that you've played. You've got a search function, which is pretty self-explanatory, an app center, which allows you to use different apps like a music player, video player, or an ebook reader. I don't really know anyone who uses these sort of apps on these devices, but if it is something that you want to take advantage of course you can with this. Then moving into the settings section, we've got access to pretty much all of our basic settings. We've got a lock screen, we've got the backlight brightness. Now this is going to allow 5 different levels. 5 is going to be obviously our highest, 1 is going to be our lowest, which is a pretty big drop off. Now this is going to be good for low light situations where you don't need your screen blaring into your eyes. Then you've got, of course, your IO tester, so you can see all the buttons are functioning as designed. Everything looks and feels pretty good, very responsive. No major issues at all. And then you've got some additional settings like your network settings if you want to connect this thing to Wi-Fi, RetroArch, there's going to be Bluetooth settings. And then you've got some additional settings like your background image can be set. They've got a few different options that you can choose here. I'm just going to leave it on the default ones. But that's pretty much it. It's a super simple navigation menu. And I really do think that they've done a great job designing a UI that is super simple to use. Anyone could pick this up and get a game launched within a few minutes. Now, in terms of performance, as I mentioned earlier, we're running the H700 chip. We've seen this on multiple other devices. We know we're going to be able to play our retro games no problem. We're going to be able to get some Dreamcast games running no problem. And now that we've got the ability to run some of these more advanced games through their standalone emulator like PPSSPP for PSP, we're actually going to see an improvement in PSP performance. But to jump in on some of the actual gameplay, we're going to get started with some simpler emulation. We're talking Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Game Boy Advance, some PS1, stuff like that. So we're going to jump into that and I'll let you guys check that out. So now we're going to go ahead and jump into some slightly more advanced emulation. We're going to go into some Dreamcast, then we're going to do some N64, and then we're going to wrap things up with some PSP. And overall performance with the Dreamcast is pretty good. We see this on all of the other RG35XX devices. Dreamcast seems to run with no problems at all, but I'll go ahead and let you guys check that out for yourselves.
It's showtime. I'll show you next time. This victory strengthened the soul of Yoshimitsu.
Next, we're going to go ahead and jump into some N64 emulation. Now, I've said this 1,000 times on the channel with various different devices, but I find that playing N64 without any sort of an analog stick is a pretty big drawback, and it prevents you from playing a ton of your favorite games. So, although N64 can run reasonably well for some of these titles, it's not really something that I would recommend buying this specific handheld for. There's lots of other devices with the same power or more powerful in and around the same price point that you'll get a better N64 experience out of. So now we're going to go ahead and jump into some PSP emulation. As I mentioned earlier, we're running on the standalone PPSSPP emulator, so we're going to get better performance overall. I will mention that the resolution is set to 1x. We can't really squeeze that much more out of it. Maybe some of the lower resource-intensive games you might be able to get 2x. But for this demonstration, I've left everything at 1x. And I do have frame skip on, so just keep that in mind. I don't... Now, one of the other interesting features that you would come to expect with the clamshell device is the sleep mode. So you would hope that what happens is when you close it up, your screen's going to turn off, it'll go into a sleep mode. It does have some magnets in here that allow it to register when the clamshell's closed. When it is, the screen's going to be off, and then when you open it up, it turns back on. This is great. Now, it's not an indefinite sleep mode. Even in sleep mode, it does draw some energy, so it's not going to stay charged for a long period of time, but it does help with power save mode. So definitely a great option. And then, of course, if you just want to power it down to save the battery altogether, you just simply press the power button and it goes off, and it stays off until you power it back on. Now, this is coming in at a retail price of around $65 directly on the Anbernic website, and that's going to depend or scale up with the type of storage option that you choose. Now, also keep in mind that Anbernic does not include a lot of people's favorite Nintendo Mario-style games on their pre-built SD cards. So if that's something that you want, it doesn't really matter what size card you get, you're going to have to add those games yourself. Now, overall, I'm actually somebody who really doesn't have a lot of nostalgia for the Nintendo Gameboy SP device. The clamshell was a little bit outside of the time frame in which I was playing some of these handhelds. I kind of went from Gameboy Advance, and then I really got back into handhelds again back in the Nintendo DS era. So I kind of skipped over the SP. So like I said, it doesn't have a lot of nostalgia for me, but I do see the appeal. Now, obviously, one thing that's a big benefit is that when it's in kind of closed as a clamshell, the screen's well protected. And you don't have to worry about it getting scratched in your pocket or in your backpack or whatever. It's a very small form factor in terms of portability, so if you throw this in your pocket, it's great. But on the flip side, when you open it, it's actually a pretty large device as well. So you get the full 3.5-inch screen, plus you get the benefit of closing it up. Now, I will say that its frame is a little bit chunky in terms of its thickness, and I do wonder if they could have made this any thinner, just so that way it is a little bit nicer in your pocket and you don't have a giant bulge kind of sticking out. But that being said, overall, this is a great little handheld. The performance on it across all of the different games that we've tested have been quite good, and I really see this as being a really great value at the $65 price point. Now, as always, I'm going to leave some links in the description down below for you guys to check out, maybe learn a little bit more, or you can purchase one yourself if you are interested. But that's pretty much all I've got for you guys in this video. Thank you so very much for watching, and I'll speak to you guys again real soon.